Can I get a witness? Hey, what's your testimony? What does testimony mean? Well, the testimony of a witness basically says what he saw. A witness doesn't try to convince the jury or the judge of the facts of the case. They're just there to say what they saw, what happened to them. So tonight on the Heaven's Metal Show, I'm going to share my testimony. So I'm here with the girls at the makeup aisle in HEB. So to kill time, I'm gonna shoot a Heaven's Metal show right here in HEB, which is like the best store in Texas, grocery store wise. It's amazing. It's like way better than Ralph's, way better than Vaughn's. They got really good prices and fantastic produce and meat and stuff and service, and it's great. Anyway, so the Holy Spirit really got involved in the Van Pelt's life and when I was alive through my grandparents. Granddad and grandma grew up in church, were religious people, but they were not born again, and they saw the light, found Jesus, got born again, and retired from the farm in Kansas and moved to Southern California near Anaheim. My granddad owned a shop. Anyway, there's a story I wrote a song about called Grandpa's Dangerous Prayer, and I talked about a moment in my granddad's life where God told him he couldn't use him because he hated somebody. And as soon as my granddad heard that, he knew the person that God was pinpointing, and he booked a trip back to Kansas and settled up with that guy. And then when he came back to California, their ministry with young people flourished. And I've run into people in Austin, Texas, of all places, who knew my grandparents. They would take them to Calvary Chapel and Melody Land and places that had Christian services. A lot of Jesus freaks and hippies were getting saved, listening to rock music and loving Jesus. So anyway, through the influence of my grandparents, my oldest sister Valerie got saved, and my dad, who was grew up going to church but didn't know Jesus, he was watching Valerie like a hawk and saw the change in her life. He decided he was looking into it. And in the summer of '72, there was a big event in Dallas called Explo 72, put on by Campus Crusade for Christ. And they would have like evangelism workshops during the day where all the Christians would go and do some street witnessing in the streets of Dallas. And at nighttime, they would go over to the Cotton Bowl and hear Billy Graham preach. And they had wristbands to attend all the events. And some of the teenagers that stayed at our house gave my mom and dad wristbands so they could go to the Cotton Bowl to hear Billy Graham preach. On the way to the Cotton Bowl, there was a T intersection that my dad and mom were crossing. They were the tail end of a large group of people walking across the street. And there was some drunk driver, some rogue driver that was ignoring the police officers' commands to stop and went right through making the turn where my dad was crossing, and all of his weight was on his forward foot. All he had time to do was like push my mom out of the way. And he said somebody kicked him into the grass. And, after the driver had been arrested, the cop ran up to my dad. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" He goes, "Yeah, who pushed me? Who kicked me?" And he goes, "Nobody, sir. No, there's nobody around you." And so my dad was convinced that an angel pushed him out of the way, saved his life, so he could respond to the altar call that Billy Graham gave that night. Years and years later, my dad was getting some mail from Campus Crusade for Christ, and they sent a video to celebrate an anniversary, and the video had Billy Graham, the same sermon that my dad responded to at Came to Christ. He got it in his hands, which was kind of a cool moment, like 50 years later. So anyway, I accepted Christ at age 11 at Calvary Hill Baptist Church in Fairfax, Virginia, probably as a result of a sermon about the rapture and the end times and being right with God when the rapture happened and the second coming of Christ happened, so he would not be left behind or facing judgment. So I got saved, took it real seriously. I read my Bible. I still have that Bible. It's a living Bible, and it's highlighted like yellow all over the place. I was learning about worship and what it meant to worship. I was getting my feet with evangelism through the grace of God, and by his grace, my two best friends got saved. I remember leading them to Christ and wanting to carve their initials on the tree and like the date they were born again and stuff like that. So anyway, it was a real thing for me. Christ came into my life and things were different. And that lasted about 6 months. I'm not sure why. I slowly but surely walked away from the Lord, but I did. There's two moments that come to mind that were emotional, traumatic events that happened to me through evangelism. One time I was putting tracts in everybody's folder on the outside of their coat closet, a little tract called Chicken. It was a gospel tract, and our teacher, Mrs. Tesdall, the dear old lady that everybody loved, was so upset about the separation of church and state and me having to take all the tracts back and not dispense those that she was brought to tears. Another moment in the same year, I was trying to witness to my grandpa Doc on the front porch, and he didn't want to talk about Jesus. So I went into the kitchen to talk about with Grandma Daisy. Why doesn't Grandpa Doc want to talk about Jesus? And she got so upset. She said, there's some things you don't talk about, politics and religion. And she was so upset she was crying. So two people that I love dearly, I brought to tears through my evangelistic efforts. Maybe that had something to do with it, I don't know. But slowly, surely walked away from the Lord. Didn't get involved in any horrible, huge bank robbery type sins or anything crazy like that. Didn't really backtalk my parents or make a scene. Wasn't a bad kid, but Jesus was not Lord of my life. And anyway, I was not walking with him at all. And that was for 9 years I was a prodigal son, and rock and roll became something I was very excited about. I was kind of scared of drugs, didn't want to touch drugs in junior high or high school, and moved to California where everybody smoked weed and didn't want to do it, kind of scared of it. After a couple years of peer pressure, I kind of succumbed to that and became an evangelist for that lifestyle, and was learning about life through my heroes, Ted Nugent and Steven Tyler of Aerosmith and people like that. Went to college, was glad to be out on my own, not having to live under my parents' rules, and got to explore that lifestyle for a couple years. And then I remember my sophomore year of college, I was kind of getting lonely, feeling like I don't know. I don't want to have the cliche like something was missing, because I knew all about Jesus. I kind of even thought that the rapture might happen in 1988, because Israel had formed again like a fig tree blooming again in 1948, and a generation later Christ would return. So I figured 88 was the time, and I would probably repent and get right with God in 87, cover my bases, and which is ridiculous and kind of a mockery. And but anyway, I really actually thought that, but didn't really want to talk about God, didn't want to think about him, because deep down inside, a conviction probably would have had root to grow and force me to come to a decision when I didn't want to do that. So I distracted myself with drugs and rock and roll and whatnot. And anyway, the summer between my sophomore and first junior year, I took a 5-year plan to go to college. So I had 2 junior years or 2 senior years, however you want to do the math for that. But in the summertime, after my sophomore year, through the influence of a friend of mine named Greg, who had been praying for me, had been weeping over the condition of my soul in prayer, had been fasting and praying for me. Through his influence, I was kind of confronted with the verse James 4:4 that says, "You adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity towards God? Therefore, if you're a friend of the world, you're an enemy of God." I didn't like being thought of as an enemy of God. I knew there was consequences to that. And I knew that Christians were the happiest people on earth. I'd felt the presence of God at a church retreat one time when I was in junior high. So anyway, that night I kind of surrendered to Christ, and I was really counting the cost, because I knew that I was going to have to give up my lifestyle, and I kind of liked my lifestyle, kind of dug it. And my friend put on this DeGarmo and Key album. The album was called This Ain't Hollywood, and there's a song called You Gave Me All, which talked about, I knew your rules and I read your book, but my heart was cold as steel. I knew how to pray, but I did not kneel. And so I felt convicted that I needed to make a decision. I wanted to be serious about it. Didn't want to keep falling down and just be a recovering Christian and having to get saved all the time and stuff, which is kind of ridiculous. And I wasn't even considering that, but just, you know what I mean. Just, if I was going to do this, I wanted to do it for real. And that was a big deal, because I knew I was going to have to give up a lot of stuff. So I felt like I had to write a resolution. And during the conversation with my friend, he goes, "See that pen on the floor? That blue pen can write upside down, sideways, underwater. Astronauts could probably use that. Here, you want it?" He gave me a pen. I thought, when I get home tonight, I'm going to write the resolution. When I got home that night, the Bible I'd been reading, I'd been slowly kind of searching things out. The Bible I'd left open on the kitchen table was closed, and there was a card sticking out of it. And I thought, oh, isn't that sweet? My mom and dad must have written me a letter. I opened up the card and it was blank, and I thought, oh man, this is like a God thing. I got the pen, now I got the paper, I need to write my resolution. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. My friends Steve and Pat from high school, they need to know about Jesus. If they don't know Jesus, I don't want them to suffer the consequences of that. I need to reach out to them, but I need to write the resolution. But I need to reach out to them. Resolution, reach out to them. What do I do? What do I do? Oh God, help me. And so I flipped open the Bible, which I call the hunt and peck method, and went plop. And that verse that my finger hit said, don't worry about the speck in your brother's eye when there's a log in your own. First take the log out of your own eye so you can see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So like, okay, God, you're speaking to me. I wrote the resolution, never look back. That was in the summer of 1983. So there's my testimony, and never regretted that decision one single bit. So join the discussion. Tell me about your life, your story. Where are you at right now?